inviting me in this conference that is very honor for me and for my institute, the Women University Multan. So let me introduce little bit
Sorry for the
about myself,
interruption.
and
Can you
here
please
is
put it in slideshow mode? Slideshow.
uh, I have already shared the. Is there? You can see.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can see your presentation, but can you please play it in a slideshow mode? It's fine
Okay,
now.
is it?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, okay. So here is Dr. Shazia Praveen. I'm working since 2015 as assistant professor in the Department of Zoology, the Women University Multan. My PhD in neurobiology from South Korea, the Catholic University of Korea. So just ignore the date of my presentation because my office, Microsoft Office was not working, so I couldn't be able to edit this date. So let me uh, start of my presentation, role of polyphenols in neuronal disorders and in prostate cancer. Most of the polyphenols are about 8,000 polyphenolic structures are currently known. Among them, over 4,000 flavonoids have been identified. Polyphenols exist with variable structures and found in vegetables, fruits, grains, roots, tea, and wine. If we talk in as a layman, so all the fruits and vegetables we having around us and we used on the daily basis with different colors, they have the polyphenols, and they have the ability of as an antioxidant effect, anti-inflammatory, anti-carcinogenic effect, and anti-aging. So this is the right now these days are very it's very in this field these days so many work is going on. This is my combination of 2-3 project that I have been completed, and 2-3 projects already been most of my work is on polyphenols. Cyanidine 3-glucoside is the component of anthocyanin which belong to the flavonoid family, and neuroprotective potential, oxygen glucose deprivation, ameliorate ethanol neurotoxicity in the developing brain. So here is some product that launched as a patent in Korea from the cyanidine 3-glucoside. One of them is glutamate is one of the major excitatory neurotransmitter in the central nervous system, as well as a glutamate-induced increase in the intracellular free calcium concentration, induced mitochondrial depolarization, and mitochondrial matrix calcium overload can lead to enhanced formation ROS, that is a reactive oxygen species, which trigger as a result apoptotic cascade, as well as neurotoxicity is widely thought to be key event of neuronal damage, ranging from acute insults such as ischemia and traumatic injury to chronic neurodegenerative disorders such as Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's. In my lab, mostly work is going on in Parkinson. So the next is uh, how this work is neuroprotective effect of zinc chelation take place. Zinc accumulation in degenerating neuronal soma was noted in a forebrain ischemia rodent model where a neuroprotective was observed with zinc chelators in this study. But similar histological event was provided in rodent model of traumatic injury, which also demonstrated neuroprotection with zinc chelation. Zinc neurotoxicity also play a vital role in this as a neurodegenerative in generating the neurodegenerative disorders. To clarify how cyanidine 3-glucoside affect glutamate-induced zinc calcium signaling in neurons. to examine whether cyanidine 3 glucosides affect neuronal disorders. And there was primary cell culture used in which pure hippocampal cells and the live cell microscopy was also be used for the analysis of calcium and zinc. These two methodologies are used after culturing the cells. So in figure 1, these results shows that glutamate-induced intracellular zinc increases by a release of zinc from intracellular sources in cultured rat hippocampus cell neurons. 100 micromolar glutamate-induced intracellular calcium inside the cells, and after 35 minutes washing, the intracellular calcium concentration decreased, as well as this indicates that how intracellular calcium increased by as a inducer of glutamate. And 35 same experiment was done with the TPEN, that is chelator of the neuronal cells, and calcium EDTA was used to check that how this intracellular calcium works. And after that, calcium cyanidine 3 glucoside 100 nanogram per ml to 1 milligram per ml used by inducing the intracellular zinc concentration in the hippocampus cells. And from figure A to its F, there is effect of 30-minute the cells was treated with the cyanidine 3 glucosides and after inducing with the glutamate. And you can see its effect as the concentration increased up to 1 milligram, the intracellular zinc was decreased. And the IC50 value was calculated by using these concentration. It was about 14.1 microgram per ml. That was used in further experiments. So here is effect of intracellular effect of cyanidine 3 glucosides that effect on the assay on the in the presence of chelator and antioxidant Trolox was used as a positive control. And here you can see this data is in the presence that was also reported in the glutamate receptor mediated intracellular calcium increases has been reported to induced formation of ROS as well as zinc. So we designed this experiment in consideration of this previous data. So here we can see this concentration dependent zinc concentration inside the cell also decreased even in the presence of positive control Trolox and chelator. So calcium and zinc concentration, zinc and calcium concentration decreased by using the cyanidine 3 glucoside. So here is like a summary of these experiments. We can you can see that the effect of cyanidine 3 glucoside, Trolox, DT, and Bacta, chelator, TPN on glutamate-induced formation of ROS. In the control as a vehicle was used, and cyanidine 3 glucoside, Trolox, DTT, Bepta, and TPN was used. So there was this is an indicator that intracellular glutamate induced zinc and calcium concentration fluctuate and its homeostasis factor with the formation of ROS that was induced by the glutamate and cyanidine 3 glucoside that maintained. So here is the cyanidine 3 glucoside as an inhibitory effect in the mitochondrial membrane potential MPP. So it's the same concentration was used as I have already told that intracellular mitochondrial membrane potential also be its inhibitory effect of cyanidine 3 glucoside shown in the presence of beta, terpene, and Trolox DTT. So here is it's a summary in the G. It's a concentration of here was a control cyanidine 3 glucoside, Trolox, DTT, TPN, and these vehicle in the histopathological and cell analysis. These are single cell, it's a hippocampus neurons, rat, pure culture, neurotoxicity. You can see how these cells maintain their integrity and the compact form of the neuronal cells, and how this glutamate induced apoptosis in the presence of glutamate and this cyanidine 3 glucoside ameliorate the effect of glutamate. So there is we can conclude a little bit that effect of cyanidine 3 glucoside on proliferation and cell death through calcium homeostasis of endoplasmic reticulum in human prostate and LNCAP cells as well as in neuronal hippocampus cells also factor. In the next, there is also cyanidine 3 glucoside effect on the proliferation and cell death in LNCAP cells is indicated with the passage of time duration 24 hours to 6 hours and from 1 microgram per ml to 100 microgram per ml cyanidine 3 glucoside effect on the cell death and as well as cell proliferation in the prostate cancers, as well as basal level of ER calcium modulation in LNCAP cells also analyzed from within 24 hours to 72 hours. So that is also significant effect of cyanidine 3 glucoside in LNCAP cells. Here is in this ER in endoplasmic reticulum calcium also it shows its effect on the endoplasmic reticulum calcium in by inducing the in the presence of epidermal growth factor as well as without epidermal growth factor. So if we have to be little bit precisely summarized all these things, it's very clear that reproducible glutamate induced intracellular zinc increases were elicited by glutamate 100 micromole for 7 minutes at 37 minutes intervals. Intracellular zinc chelate terpene markedly blocked glutamate induced intracellular zinc responses, whereas the extracellular zinc chelate CEDTA didn't affect the intracellular zinc responses. So cyanidine 3 glucoside from 100 nanogram to 1 milligram for 35 minutes inhibited glutamate induced intercellular calcium, and there upon these results IC50 was calculated. Cyanidine 3 glucoside 15 microgram per ml significantly inhibited glutamate induced zinc and calcium in the presence of beta, that is a calcium chelator, as well as it's inhibit the TPIN significantly inhibit glutamate induced intracellular zinc increases without affecting on glutamate induced intracellular calcium response. So the fourth, two membrane permeable antioxidant such as Trolox and DT inhibit glutamate induced intracellular zinc without affecting its glutamate induced intracellular calcium increases. The next parameter that we already I have told in the presentation, that was its effect on cyanidin 3 glucoside on the significantly inhibit glutamate induced formation of ROS, cyanidin and beta AM significantly inhibit glutamate induced mitochondrial depolarization, because all these things are very interlinked with the glutamate induced neuronal cell death via ROS, that is a reactive oxygen species. So the conclusion of my presentation is the cyanidin 3 glucoside inhibits glutamate induced intracellular zinc increases through a release of zinc from intracellular sources in cultured rat hippocampal neurons by inhibiting calcium induced mitochondrial depolarization and formation of ROS, which is involved in neuroprotection against glutamate induced cell death. So in my lab, these projects, this histopathological assessment on the rotenone-induced Parkinson rat model, that is recently published in 5.4 impact factor, and the green synthesis of gold and silver nanoparticles by using plant extract on Parkinson rat model, that is under publication, and the effect of solanum diagram on blood biochemistry, cholesterol, glucose, and urea level of rotenone-induced Parkinson rat model, that is under process. So these projects almost completed, and one is published. More than that, another 9 to 10 project is ongoing. That is main work in my neurobiological lab in the Women University, Multan, Pakistan. So thank you so much for listening my presentation. And if you have any question and queries, kindly ask me, and it will be honor for me. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Sagar Kamuradia, consultant in neurorehabilitation in University Hospitals of Leicester. This talk is based on service evaluation conducted in a neurorehabilitation unit at University Hospitals of Leicester. The focus is on how well patients engaged with a computerized cognitive program called REACOM, with what barriers emerge, what these findings mean for the use of the digital cognitive rehabilitation along with the conventional therapy in an inpatient setting. So, why this topic matters? Acquired brain injury is a major clinical issue, with the paper citing around 350,000 admissions to UK hospital each year. ABI can affect cognition, emotional regulation, and daily functioning, which is why cognitive rehabilitation is such an important part of recovery. Computer assisted tools such as REACOM may expand rehabilitation options, but their success depends on whether patients can and will engage with them in routine practice. So, overall, ABI burden is very high, cognitive effects often limit independence, and digital tools may extend rehab therapy options. Computer assisted cognitive rehabilitation has shown promising results in improving various aspects of cognitive rehab in various studies. It has shown good effect on attention, memory, processing speed, executive functioning, and patient engagement in neurological rehabilitation. It can provide an adaptive task difficulty interface. There is repetitive neuroplasticity driven training, increase patient motivation, and individualized rehabilitation program. So, what were the aims of this service evaluation? The basic aim for this service evaluation was very practical. It was to evaluate the usage and the adherence to REACOM in inpatient neurorehabilitation setting, which has not been studied so far. It was to explore patient engagement and barriers to the participation and consider how REACOM might complement conventional cognitive rehabilitation in patients with cognitive impairment. A further goal was to identify which patient groups may be most likely to benefit from this type of intervention. The setting for this study was the evaluation was conducted in a tertiary neurorehabilitation unit in Leicester, UK. This unit takes only highly complex neurorehabilitation needs patients. A total of 27 patients were included, following the inclusion and exclusion criteria. They were aged between 20 to 80 years, had a MoCA score below 26, and were admitted between October 2021 and 2023. The mean score was 19, the mean length of stay was 51 days, and 63% of the patients were men. So the REACOM sessions were delivered on a portable computer using a custom keyboard, and patients completed both MoCA screening and REACOM screening to guide the program. Patients were offered one REACOM session per week during the first 5 weeks of admission, with each session replacing one weekly conventional occupation therapy cognitive rehabilitation session. For the purposes of the evaluation, successful engagement meant participating for more than 15 minutes in a session. Interestingly, the patients who were not able to complete the REACOM screening still completed the MoCA screening. This is a picture of the REACOM software being used with the custom keyboard to match patients' cognitive abilities. Engagement results. The engagement results showed a clear drop off across the pathway. 6 of the 27 patients, that is 22%, could not complete the REACOM screening. Another 22% completed the REACOM screening but could not sustain the minimum 15 minutes of engagement. Around 26% engaged in fewer than 5 weekly sessions, while 8 patients, or 30%, completed all 5 sessions. Overall, fewer than one-third of the sample completed the full 5-session program, which suggests the engagement was mixed rather than consistent across the inpatient ABI group. Interestingly, the patients who could not complete the REACOM screening were actually able to complete the MoCA screening. So why was the engagement variable? The paper identified several reasons why engagement could be variable. Patients who could not complete the screening often had agitation, reduced attention or insight, or difficulty using the computer controls because of cognitive deficits. Among those who could sustain 15 minutes, the main issues were cognitive impairment and cognitive fatigue. Among those who completed fewer than 5 sessions, they felt the exercises were too simple, they had a preference for conventional therapy, or there was issues related to persistent cognitive difficulties, or some of them were discharged before the end of program of 5 weeks. These findings suggest that disengagement was not random, but related to clinical status, usability, motivation, and timing within the rehabilitation pathway. So, who engaged better? One of the clearest messages from the paper is that patients with higher MoCA scores showed better engagement with REACOM. What does this suggest? This suggests that patients with relatively preserved cognitive capacity were more able to understand the task, manage the interface, and continue across repeated sessions. The implication is that REACOM may be best used in selected patient subgroups rather than offered universally to all ABI patients. So, certain clinical implications of the study. The practical message is that REACOM appears most promising as an adjunct to conventional cognitive rehabilitation rather than a replacement for it. The findings also suggest that better patient selection, clearer explanation on purpose, and more attention to timing within the rehabilitation process may improve adherence. In practice, services may achieve better engagement by using screening tools such as MOCA, which are pen and paper, alongside clinical judgment to identify patients who are most likely to tolerate and benefit from these kind of interventions. This is a scatter plot showing the MOCA scores versus the sessions completed. And as you can see, MOCA score over 18 showed better session engagement overall. There are certain limitations to the study. It had a relatively small sample size. There was no control group. The study focused on early inpatient engagement rather than long-term functional or cognitive outcomes after discharge. So there is the need for future work for larger samples, longer follow-up, and stronger outcome measures to establish not just feasibility, but also clinical effectiveness. So what is the take-home message? The take-home message is REHACOM has potential within inpatient acquired brain injury rehabilitation, but engagement can be variable. The major barriers being severe cognitive deficits, cognitive fatigue, usability challenges, and patient preference for conventional therapy. Patients with higher MOCA scores appeared more likely to adhere, which supports a more targeted and supported approach to implementation. The strongest conclusion from this presentation is that digital cognitive rehabilitation or computer-assisted cognitive rehabilitation may be valuable, but careful patient selection and thoughtful integration into conventional rehabilitation is essential. These are some of my references. Thank you.
Thank you, the organizers, for the event, for inviting me. It's a great moment for me. It's a own moment talking about Zaxunt with different specialists and great researchers in the area. And today I'm talking about the rehabilitation of patients with chronic pain. And I will not address just one symptoms, but a illness that affects both physical and emotional health. Chronic pain is a complex syndrome, is a complex prognostic for patients and affect your family, affect your working, affect the society, and the cycle is vicious cycle for chronification, for the poor quality of the life, and is the most cause for disability in the world because the International Association of the Study of the Pain define the unpleasant sensorial emotional experience associated with or reasonable that associated with actual or potential or tissue demands. You don't need having the potential tissue demand. It's possible you're having demand, tissue demand, but you don't have need this situation. Chronic pain is a long process for chronification of your symptoms, chronification of your pain. And these situations related about the stress, burnout, relation in strain, and abstinence for your lost functional, lost productivity, and your poor quality of the life because affects your functional capacity. This is a cycle for pain, cycle for chronic pain. If you're having pain and you don't have the good treatment or don't result in these situations, the pain affects negatively. Your affect your emotional systems and your catastrophe for the movement, catastrophe for and your symptoms for emotional, for physical. And about this, it's possible you're having fear of the pain and they have an emotional response about anxiety, about depression, and other symptoms, emotional symptoms. And about the avoid behaviors, avoid the limited physical levels, disability, and functional disconditional. This is a cycle for chronic pain. What is chronic pain? Chronic pain is the pain that persistently recurs for more than 3 months. If you're having pain for more than 3 months, you're having chronic pain. The main cause for chronic pain is unhealed injuries, because the poor rehabilitation or because you don't have an assessment for rehabilitation, or you don't have a better understanding for the situation for the pain, it's possible development chronic pain. But chronic pain is associated with an unhealthy lifestyle. The most people having chronic pain having the poor diets and the sedentarian and they don't sleeping well. These are similar and comorbidities for people having chronic pain. What's the prevalence for chronic pain? Chronic pain is high prevalence in the individuals having neurological disorders, and the high prevalence for individuals having musculoskeletal pain and individuals having cardiac disorders. It's a similar condition because the comorbidities, diabetes, because the other neuro symptoms, the other neuro disorders, because the comorbidities, sedentary, diets, sleeping, and the lifestyle. And the people don't have a good treatment for the pain, and the acute pain, a post-surgical pain. Chronic pain in mental disorders. Researchers need longitudinal studies with standardized assessment to clarify the cause. And it's possible to observe in the literature the chronic pain is one main cause of disability in the world, reducing the quality of the life, and is also responsible for increase the risk of the mortality of the population. Thinking about this picture, about these two cases, the two patients, different patients. I have patients who have a high level for the pain, but having their functional capacity. I have patients who have a high level for chronic pain, but don't have a good functional capacity. The treatment for the pain is management for the pain. Don't have the treatment for result the pain, the chronic pain, but you are managing the pain. And if you are don't managing the functional capacity, you are don't improving the quality of the life, you are don't thinking about the cardiac disease, you are having a poor situation for chronic pain. If you're having a good functional capacity, if you're having a good structure for your body, your musculoskeletal systems, you have your mental symptoms control, you're having a good prognosis for the chronic pain. Don't result the problem, but your prognosis is high better. Lifestyle, sedent diets, and sleep disorders, comorbidities. It's very common, and patients having these comorbidities having a high incidence for development chronic pain. About the physiological neurosystems about chronic pain. In the transductions, in the number one picture, you're having acute pain. You're having channels, open the channels for neuroinflammatory systems for the acute pain, for the control for the inflammatory system. And the other picture, having the neuroinflammatory pain, having chronic pain. About the number of the channels, about the number for the neurotransmission, having a lot more neurotransmission, a lot more connection, have a lot more sensibility, have a lot of dysfunctional for people have your sensibility, central neurosensibility. And the modulation is equal. People have acute pain, having a lot of sensibility, but people having chronic pain having a lot more and your muscles, sensibility are having synesthesia, about the perception, and the nervous system. The picture number one is about acute pain. People having connection, emotional connection, about insights, about depressions. But if people having chronic pain, the number of activations in our nervous systems is a lot of more connections, and the people having a lot of more sensibility for you don't having a good expectation. The people having synesthesia, people don't having a good memory, people don't having a good planning for the test. And they're talking about this and about the type when it's possible treatment and what strategy I using for treat this patient. Because this patient needs the multimodal treatment. I need treatment for the body systems, for the musculoskeletal systems, but I needed then treatment for the cognitive systems. In this article, I observed in the literature the high incidence for people developing chronic pain in cardiac disorders. And the potential problem for this is nodal stress. People having pain, people having a lot of sensibility, a lot of activation for your symptoms, sympathetic nervous systems. It's specific for your sympathetic nervous systems about the 11-year heart rate, 11-year blood pressures, and people having a lot of activator for your sympathetic nervous system and the poor activator for your parasympathetic nervous system. This situation is nodal stress. The nodal stress is responsible for chronification for the pain and responsible for people having a high incidence for developing cardiac disease. And it's very common patients in the cardiac disease development chronic pain, and the other situation, people having chronic pain development cardiac disease because the functional capacity. The vicious cycle theory, if people having pain, people have a muscular hyperactive and they have a muscular ischemia. People have a muscular ischemia, people having pain, and the people have a muscular hyperactive. This cycle theory for chronification for the pain. And the evidence demonstrated evocated pain and the people have a knee pain, and the problem results in the most moments and the accurate moments people inhibit your muscles. People don't have a good response in their muscles, and people don't have the good functional in their muscles. Evidence support this theory has been demonstrated with decreased peak generations for both kidney flexion and extension after the induction of experimental kidney pain intrafatigular pads injection hypertonic saline that largely recovers once that pain has resolved. In this article, I observed the literature, the evidence for the pathophysiological changes in the people having chronic pain and the health people. And I observed the literature studies and demonstrated evaluation for objective evaluation. Evaluation about ultrasonography, about resonance, magnetic resonance, about blood pressure, about heart rate, about objective evaluations for these patients. The literature demonstrates the muscular inhibition is common among these individuals, arising from adaptive behavior to protect against increasing pain, inducing muscular atrophy, and observed by ultrasonography examinations with scaled a model of adaptation to pain. Altered sympathetic networks in response to pain behavior, which is associated with fear, anxiety, depressions, cognitive and affective changes, and memory deficits associated with difficulty in carrying out plan of the task. Thinking about these patients for planning the task for movement, for walking, for physical activities, for activities of your daily, is these situations don't have a good control motor, don't have a good functional capacity. And thinking about these individuals improving exercise, doing exercise. Myopathies are associated with changes in the concentrations of glycolytic and oxidative fibers, predisposing the individuals to muscular fatigue and inability to generate energy necessary for muscular contractions, neuromuscular dysfunction of motor control, muscular inhibitions, balance, and perception deficits. Physical activities, physical abilities is very hard for these individuals. I need strategy sufficiently for improving this ability. The treatment of these individuals are multimodal and multidisciplinary. When I evaluate these patients, I need active listening. I need to understand your history and relevant points for the assessment, the general health and red flags. I need understand the situation, understand the risk for the treatment for this individual, and the expectation for this individual for the treatment, and the biopsychological, social, aspects is very important. Sleeping, diet, pen assessment, never subdue someone pen, and inspection, physical assessment, edema, skin. And for after this, I evaluation the functional assessment. But for I having a good treatment for improving the functional assessment, I think in the need evaluations all systems for this individual. In these studies, I address how to work with these changes and dysfunctional. The multimodal physical therapy, and I talk on the importance for the using different strategies, electrothermal biological strategies, and manual therapy and exercise, and functional cognitive exercise, and education for the pain, and the other strategies, and medicine, and the other professional for the health, for improving the treatment for these individuals. And the multimodal physical therapy is a physical therapy approach where the professional uses several therapeutic resources and the combination in the same session. But you're needing using the different strategies, but specific strategies, individualizing the strategy. I don't use an all therapies for all patients, and I use multimodal physical therapy. Not. The multimodal physical therapy is evaluation point to point, but the patient needs the cognitive aspect, need exercises for improving your balance. Or other patients don't need. I need evaluation, I need individualizing this multimodal therapeutic. Monitoring of signs and symptoms, pain, heart rate, blood pressures, perceptions of exertations, pain management, electrophysical therapy, manual therapy, pain education, self-treatment, assessment and optimizing of motor control. Straight motor control is not easy exercise. It's not is slowing exercise. Control motor is a kind for your introducing your movement. You need control motor when you're running. You need control motor when you're walking. But what strategy you're using and what poor adaptation you're using for the process for the chronification for the pain. But straight, muscular inhibition, joint mobility, sensory motor system, and the gait. Criteria for progressions and prescription exercise. Accuracy for the treatment. And because the pain changes in the central and the peripheral nervous systems. Pain is a cause for joint blocks, decrease the range of movement, mesophobia, and persistent pain. Muscular tension, change in the sensibility, decrease the latency for time for peripheral nerves. In these articles, I observed the efficiency and the manual therapy in the treatment for the pain. And what's the evidence for manual therapy for treating pain? The literature demonstrates some benefits of manual therapy. What's manual therapy? Manual therapy is people and the patients, the therapeutic using different kinds of abilities for your using your hands for improving the treatment. I use the manual therapy in the musculoskeletal rehabilitation, and I don't use the manual therapy alone. I use in soft tissue, I use in mobility, I use in exercising when I use in manual therapy. I use manual therapy for improving joint mobility, improvement in the range of movement, reduce kinesiophobia, and reduce pain. Analgesic effects in the manual therapy. Moderate evidence indicated the manual therapy increased in local pressure pain threshold in the musculoskeletal pain interventions. Patients with neck pain experience improvement in the pain and functional after application of manual therapy. The underlying mechanism and the active uppers to be related to reducing the concentrations for the interleukin 1B. Interleukin 1B is a typical neuroinflammatory physiological system. If you are reducing the interleukin 1B, I reducing the pain. Exercise therapy is important for these individuals? This is a question. And who are the patients that are prepared to perform this exercise? when is my patient? Exercise is the evidence is very consistently about the importance for the physical exercise, the practice for the physical activity, the exercise for these individuals. Exercise is the great and the best treatment approach for the individuals. But the patients don't prepared for improving your physical activity. My patients don't I can't walk in 10 minutes because having diabetes, because having pain in your knee, pain in your back, pain in your shoulder, because don't having capacity, functional capacity for it. What are the neurofunctional and biomechanical alterations present in individuals with the chronic pain? And what are the clinical parameters and the criteria for prescribing exercise in the treatment of the pain is a question for me for the literature. And I share my presentation, the International Conference for Study of the Pain in the South America, about these axons. A lot of studies in the literature demonstrate evidence for exercise for treatment in the chronic pain and different kinds of chronic pain: osteoarthritis, low back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, kidney pain, hip pain, and about in the fibromyalgia, about syndrome for fatigue, and about for arthritis, and having a lot of consistently for the exercise is important for exercise for these individuals. But what is this exercise? I observe a lot of kinds of exercise, and for understanding more, and I use it in the clinical practice, I classify this exercise in therapeutic exercise. What is therapeutic exercise? Therapeutic exercise if you're using any kinds of exercise, and objectives for you is treatment for the pain, treatment for any situations. And the physical activity you're using exercise, but your primary objective is not treatment. And the body and the mind exercise, if you are using meditations and you are using breath, and the exercise is kind of typical Chinese exercise. And the literature is most consistently and having a most evidence for the therapeutic exercise. Therapeutic exercise is not better body-mind exercise in the physical activity, but for treatment in the pain is more evidence for therapeutic exercise in the literature. But in my article, in my study, I observed the therapeutic exercise demonstrated the good results for control the pain in the medium term, short term, for the getting better the functional capacity, but don't have an evaluation in the medium term, and don't have an evaluation for the long term, don't have an evaluation or good results for kinesiophobia and the quality of the life. The therapeutic exercise improving the joint dysfunctional and improving the muscle dysfunctional, but don't have an evaluation for the gait, don't have an evaluation for the balance system, and it's very important in this individual. Exercise analysis. Pain evaluated by 31 exercise studies, and 77% of the 14 studies analyzed, 20 studies observing the clinical improvements. The functional capacity evaluated by 29 studies, 72% of the 14 studies analyzed observed improvement. The quality of the life. 22 studies of the 14 studies analyzing, 2 studies, 50% observed the clinical improvement, not having sufficiently analysis for the quality of the life. People having chronic pain, people having change in your self-perception of the pain, deficit in the multi-joint muscular strength, and the loss of functional capacity. I observed all studies for the chronic pain, all situations for the chronic pain, all kinds of their body. Exercise prescriptions for individuals with chronic pain. Thinking about the frequency, the literature is inclusive it must be adaptive to individualizing of each individual's respecting time for necessary to recover. Intense resistance exercise should be performed with the maximum 15% of the 1 RM maximum resistance when it's possible. Aerobic exercise should be started at 13% to 15% the maximum heart rate when it's possible. Thinking about these individuals that don't have the functional capacity, don't have the functional ability, don't have the good strength, don't have the capacity for aerobic exercise. Is a disability for hurting rate. This having a high incidence for development hurting disabilities. Criteria for progression. Pain tolerance must be respected of analog scale from 0 to 10, the maximum 3 points. For progression, improvement in movement quality and pain tolerance should be considered. In the case of increased pain intensity, the load or difficult of the exercise should reduce. Individuals with pain having a less accuracy to exercise. The problem is individuals don't prepared to exercise. Because don't prepared to exercise, need improving this functional ability. But individuals with chronic pain don't have an accuracy to exercise. If you don't have an accuracy to exercise, they don't have a better prognosis. And the literature demonstrates what key points you need evaluation, you need thinking about for the good accuracy for exercising these individuals. First, the characteristics of the exercise program, involvement of professionals of different disciplines, supervision, technology, initial explorations of participants' characteristics, barriers and facilitators, participants' educations, adequate expectations, and knowledge about risk and benefits. Enjoyment and abstinence unpleasant experience is very important. In this article, I observed the alterations for the control motor for the people having low back pain. And specific evaluation for transverse abdominals, the specific muscle for stabilizer your back, your low back, in the literature. We observed to following change in the control motor, change in the premotor cortex, supplementary motor areas, and the primary motor cortex, change in the muscle activation and the joint stability. How to optimize motor control? Motor control is efficient when a task is performed without using the best possible strategy, preserving joint stability. For the same task, the individual can perform the variable movement. However, individuals with chronic pain have a limited capacity to vary their movements and unable to maintain joint stability while performing a task, using inefficient adaptation tools to do. This model is a good model, and I use in this model. The literature demonstrates Sluka is a great researcher for study of the pain, the physical therapy for treatment of the chronic pain, and you're thinking about the different kinds of patients and your evaluation, motor inhibition or facilitation. Thinking about the low back pain, the chronic low back pain. It's possible people having inhibitions for the abdominals, transverse abdominal muscles, or it's possible people having facilitation of the transverse abdominals, having hyperactive contract for this muscle. And you need evaluation and individualize the treatment. In the same situation, it's possible inhibition and your transverse abdominal muscles, but having facilitation your paravertebral muscles. And you need strategy for inhibition and you need strategy for facilitation. And our article for the body and the all kinds of chronic pain, you need evaluation this model. Adapting interfere or not interfere is protective. The motor behavior is evolutional. And the suboptimal tool loading occurring. This model is a parameter for your evaluation for your start and your evaluation your patient. How to assess motor control? The good standard for research assessment is electromyographic, muscular activation, ultrasound for muscular thickness and assessment asymmetry, and images for diagnosis, synapse network, and the motion of sensor for your ability for the control motor and the joint stability. But I don't have in my clinical. This is a situation for your evaluation in the laboratory, for researches, for specific researches. In the clinical practice, change in the motor control is associated with the loss of joint stability. Joint stability is the individual ability to perform a movement or task without walking compensatory change. Stabilizing pressure biofeedback. It's possible to identify movement change and the joint stability, but not precisely determine which muscle is being activated. This is a simple task for a simple evaluation for people having instability in their back. In the picture number 1, people having a good stability, people don't have any inhibition for your transverse abdominals. After the picture 2, people having a lot of extension in your back, hyperextension for your back. Hyperextension your back results people don't having a good activation for your transverse abdominal muscles. It's possible I using this model, control posture and in the movement fast and the movement slow, for I evaluation the control motor in all individuals in all functional. In this picture, the picture number 1, if people extension your hip, don't extension your back. It's a good stability. And the number 2, if people extension your hip, people extension your back. This model demonstrates if people using your hip in the functional activities, step down or walking, people using a lot of movement in their back because people having alterations in their back. This is about the motor control. And the specific picture number 1, the Trendelenburg test, and the people don't have sufficiently structured muscle for control your pelvic floor, control your tilt pelvic. People having problem in their back. And I need evaluation, and I need good strategy for control the situation, for control this control motor. And what's the main objective in the clinical practice when you're treating your clients? I'm a physical therapist, and your quality of the life is directly related to your functional capacity. And the functional capacity is very important for me and in my clinical practice. And now I open this model for thinking about the patients, for talking about any kinds of patients. In picture number 1, pen modulation phase. Thinking about the patient having osteoarthritis. And in the first evaluation, people having edema, people having inhibition for your muscle, people having joint blocks in your knee and your hip, people don't having a good functional for your balance, you don't having good balance, people don't walking well, and they don't can having a good structure, the mechanical structure for control your movement, for support your demands, for walking, for squats. In the first phase, I need to control this phase. The manual therapy, improving the joint blocks, improving the myofascial pain. A lot of patients have musculoskeletal chronic pain, having myofascial pain. Myofascial pain is a condition in the prognosis for synesthesia, the prognosis for pain. In the manual therapy, it's possible I get better the situation, getting better the soft tissue, get better the movement. Electrophysical therapy, TNS, it's possible I modulation the pain for introducing movement, for introducing exercise for these individuals. And the biophotomodulation, changing the inflammatory system for the neuroinflammatory pain, about the chronic pain, about the hyperactivations, allodynia, hypersensibility, for thinking about the transductions, the sensorial and the axonal channels, and try control this hyperactivation is the first step. But the first step is the initial treatment is 1 session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions, no more. I need 10 in this phase. For other phase, when they're improving the functional capacity, when they're evaluating the motor control, these individuals, when I introduce an exercise for getting better, for improving your strength for your muscles, for improving your ability for your control motor, for improving your balance, for improving your functional capacity. And they're using a lot of strategy for this. I use therapeutic exercising more slowly, but I try improving this phase. I don't stop the phase in this phase. I need reconditioning of this patient. I need the resistance training. I need the functional exercise, aerobic exercise for improving the functional capacity of these individuals, for improving their quality of their lives. And I don't stop in this phase. I talking about pain education and about the importance for physical activities, for modulation, for managing for your pain, for changing your behavior, for control your symptoms, and for manage your pain for a good quality of the life, for don't having a disability, for don't having a diet for heart rate, for don't having straight relationship in your family. Thank you so much for pay attention. Is my contact Instagram, my contact email.